The asphalt of Highway 9 didn't just carry cars. It swallowed secrets, stretching across the desolate high desert of the American Southwest. It was a ribbon of black ink spilled over a landscape of jagged rock and ancient silence. Locals called it the Ghost's Tail, a stretch of road where the cellular signal died 40 miles before the engine usually did. Detective Elias Thorne sat in his idling cruiser, the glow of the dashboard illuminating the deep lines of fatigue on his face. He was 60 miles from the nearest town, parked at the edge of a ravine that had become a graveyard for the unlucky. His radio crackled, a burst of static that sounded like a dying breath. "Dispatch, can anyone Highway 9 mile marker 114 please?" Elias sat up, his spine popping. Mile marker 114 didn't exist. The markers stopped at 112, where the old bridge had collapsed in the flood of '94, rerouting the highway into a jagged detour. "Dispatch, this is Thorne, say again." Silence, then a voice so clear it felt like someone was sitting in the passenger seat. "He's coming for the rest of us. Elias, you shouldn't have stopped looking." The voice belonged to Sarah, his partner, the woman who had disappeared on this exact stretch of road 3 years ago, the midnight signal. Elias didn't think. He slammed the cruiser into gear and roared toward the dead end. The headlights cut through the swirling dust, illuminating the road closed, signs that lay face down in the dirt, weathered and forgotten. As he crossed the invisible line where the pavement ended, his GPS began to spin clockwise, a frantic needle searching for a north that no longer existed. The temperature inside the car plummeted. His breath hitched, blooming in a white cloud against the windshield. Then he saw it, a phone booth. It stood alone in the middle of the salt flats, a relic of a bygone era, its glass panes miraculously intact, and the light inside was humming, ring. The asphalt of Highway 9 didn't just carry cars. It swallowed secrets, stretching across the desolate high desert of the American Southwest. It was a ribbon of black ink spilled over a landscape of jagged rock and ancient silence. Locals called it the Ghost's Tail, a stretch of road where the cellular signal died 40 miles before the engine usually did. Detective Elias Thorne sat in his idling cruiser, the glow of the dashboard illuminating the deep lines of fatigue on his face. He was 60 miles from the nearest town, parked at the edge of a ravine that had become a graveyard for the unlucky. His radio crackled, a burst of static that sounded like a dying breath. "Dispatch, can anyone Highway 9 mile marker 114 please?" Elias sat up, his spine popping. Mile marker 114 didn't exist. The markers stopped at 112, where the old bridge had collapsed in the flood of '94, rerouting the highway into a jagged detour. A dark shape detached itself from the shimmering heat haze. It wasn't a man, but a silhouette of shifting smoke, holding a heavy iron key that pulsed with a dull, rhythmic light. The collector of Highway 9 stepped forward, the ground cracking beneath its weight. "Every mile has a cost," the shadow hissed, its voice like grinding stones. "And your partner's debt is long overdue." Elias realized then that the ravine wasn't a graveyard for the lost. It was a holding cell. Every person who had vanished on Highway 9 was caught in a fracture in time, a glitch in the desert's memory caused by the very phone booth he was standing in. He saw Sarah then, standing just beyond the collector. She was wearing the same leather jacket she'd vanished in, her eyes wide and reflecting the strange, violet stars that now filled the sky. "The booth is the anchor, Elias," Sarah shouted, her voice echoing as if from another world. "Sever the connection." The sound was impossible. There were no lines out here, no buried cables, just the wind and the bones of the desert. "Ring." Elias stepped out of the car, his hand hovering over his sidearm. The air tasted of ozone and old copper. He approached the booth, his boots crunching on something that wasn't sand, it was glass. Thousands of tiny shards from watches and spectacles, carpeting the ground. He reached out and lifted the receiver. "Sarah," he whispered. "Listen," the voice replied. It was Sarah, but her voice sounded layered, as if she was speaking through a long, metallic tunnel. "The road doesn't just end here, Elias, it loops, it feeds." Hash, the shadow in the rear view. Elias turned, his cruiser remained, but the desert around it had transformed. The salt flats were now crowded with the shimmering outlines of cars from every decade, ghostly hulls of chrome and steel, all idling in a silent, synchronized rhythm. The final toll. The collector lunged, the iron key glowing with blinding intensity. Elias didn't reach for his weapon. Instead, he grabbed the heavy, steel-bound directory chained to the booth, a book filled with names of people who hadn't yet been born and those long since buried. He slammed the directory into the receiver, jamming the mechanism as the metal twisted. The world inverted, the desert sky became a sea of glass, and the cracked asphalt turned into a ceiling of white fire. He was falling through the history of the highway. He saw the construction crews of the 1920s. He saw the outlaws of the 30s. He saw Sarah's car caught in the shimmering distortion of a midnight storm. He reached out, catching Sarah's hand as they tumbled through the chronological static. Together, they pulled against the weight of the loop, straining to reach the edge of the horizon where the sun was just beginning to break. She looked exactly as she had 3 years ago. Not a day older, her watch still ticking at the exact second she had vanished. Elias looked at his own reflection in the car window. His hair was now flecked with grey, and his eyes carried the weight of decades he hadn't lived. He had traded the vitality of his own years to pull her from the silence. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message appeared from an unknown number, the timestamp showing a date 30 years in the future. Drive safe, the road always remembers its travelers. Elias looked back at the empty road. Highway 9 shimmered in the heat haze, a long black ribbon waiting for the next traveler who thought they were just passing through. There are many more legends surrounding the American Southwest and its haunted highways. Some stories speak of the silver passenger of Route 66, while others detail the vanishing, the Mojave. Exploring the lore of these forgotten roads reveals a landscape where the past never truly stays buried.